down to business. We got to deal with Beato, man. Like Beato's out of control. I do enjoy some of his interviews, but mostly the ones where he doesn't talk much and just like interviews someone cool. And it's not even really an interview. It's more like he has a big platform, so they come on and like Steve Lukather. I watched Steve Lukather one that was great. The Sting one was good because he made the classic Beato mistake where he's like, oh, it was really cool how you do this and that, and Sting's like, I don't know anything about that, man. Like, he's like, I didn't know. Like, he thinks everyone knows more theory than they do, and then is surprised when they don't know what the hell he's talking about or care. All right. So this is an insane matching. Again, it makes sense because they're all on tour together, but it's very funny to have them all do the interview together, I think. If you don't know, I think it's called the Dream Sonic Tour. Dream Theater, Devin Townsend, and Animals as leaders. Tosin Abasi. Where's Javier? Why don't they interview Javier Reyes? I guess he's not.
We are on what we are calling the Dream Sonic Tour.
Okay.
Which is it's our very own traveling prog metal festival.
It's 3 bands, man. It's not like
Animals as leaders.
Let's not get carried away. It's like it's not it's 3 bands. 3 bands is not a festival. It's a bill. It's a tour. Like it's a tour. If you had more, like Gigantour was like a traveling festival in a sense that it had like multiple stages sometimes. Although I think they only did that 1 or 2 years, and then they were like, okay, that's limits the venues and probably costs a lot more. That's a traveling festival. You have 3 bands. As far as I know, is there even like an opener, or is it these local openers? Like who's? Because I only know these 3 guys on it.
Prog metal from prog rock.
So when I think about prog rock, I picture the bands that were from the UK, like during the 70s.
Like UK.
Right, like UK, like Yes, like Genesis, Pink Floyd.
Yep. But that's implying that they're old, that they're which is kind of accurate. That's the last time that it was progressive, but there are like newer prog rock bands that aren't prog metal. It's not progressive anymore. It's prog. And so that's but I don't think we're going to get into that differentiation.
Played by metal kids. So to me, that fusion is prog metal.
Okay, so is Rush a prog rock band, or do they have any metal overtones?
They definitely have metal overtones.
Overtones, but that's because they're proto metal. They're proto metal. Rush is before metal functionally exists. Like even the earliest metal bands, I don't believe any band in the 70s was a metal band as we would define it now. It was all proto metal, and so Rush had their proto metal moments, and then before the metal actually solidified, in essentially 1980, they went the other direction and were like, nah, and started doing all the clean tone stuff and stayed in the rock zone. They stayed out of the metal zone once the 80s hit. But yeah, it's proto metal. It's metal overtones, overtures leading up to it, but is not effectively
with music genres that, and maybe it's just because I'm a guitar player and we're all guitar players, so we'll all agree that the guitar sound kind of dictates the genre.
This is actually,
right? So it's like
I agree. I very much agree. And I feel like that is the thing that people miss. That is literally the sound and techniques. That's literally what differentiates metal. There are also maybe at this point some drum sounds and tropes, but really you could use a metal drum sound and play rock. Like it's a guitar based genre. That is the defining feature. Very good, John Petrucci.
Other incarnation of that. If the guitar tone has a lot of distortion and gain and sounds more metal, then it brings it to the metal thing. If it's kind of more
thank you, JP.
Like if you were doing gent without distortion,
yeah.
Well, what would it be?
That's a good question.
I think it still work. I think it's the intent as well too. But it's interesting you say that because
wait, gent without distortion. Depending on the gent band, but arguably jazz. That's because Meshuggah is hard jazz. So really, gent without distortion, you get jazz or some kind of like really avant kind of jazz.
The guitar leads the direction of the genre. That's how I'm looking at it.
You know, if I think about Black Sabbath, okay, now they didn't have incredibly distorted guitars, really.
That's because the technology did not yet exist, Beato. The technology followed the guys playing it who wanted it and needed the gain, and it doesn't exist until 1980. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It's no, right. They had to invent it, but by 1980, guess what they did? Tony Iommi invented all this shit. Beato, man. We need like a scorecard when Beato says some obvious dumb shit.
But you would say Black Sabbath is definitely a metal band.
Absolutely.
Except that's because they invented, and the earliest examples of it will not necessarily have all of the features of where it eventually ends up when it is fully understood as a style of music. Because classification always comes later. It does, except for like Gent, that's because the internet. But even that, Meshuggah had been around for over a decade when, and doing that for over a decade when Gent came around. It was still Meshuggah was not called Gent when they were inventing the gentiness of the time. They were most accurately a technical death metal band. Beato, man. Beato just manages to know so much theory and yet avoid so much musical understanding.
Diminished fits and things like that in like a country song.
It's so interesting because I feel like you did some stuff with, I saw your live performance in LA and you were talking about some soundtrack stuff, minor second intervals and how they're evocative and
musical features. Oh my God. We're actually going to talk about musical features and not just like it's a feel. I mean, I guess this is the right crowd, except for Devin. Devin's off in space. He's going to keep saying like, it's what you really feel, man. And we're like, listen, Devin. Go play your little serrated picks.
That's why I've always liked metal, because there's the whole part of the emotional experience that seems to be cut off from pop music.
You know why I like heavy metal is because it's really heavy and it's about wizards, demons, and all kinds of stuff.
I think it comes down to sensitivity. I think a lot of times people who get into types of music that
damn it, Devin.
be confrontational or really intense are maybe wired to perceive their environment in a way that's more hyper sensitive to stimulus, and so the best way to represent that is through a musical color that can sort of plumb those depths. I think it's actually kind of a disservice, I've always felt this way, towards heavy music to try and categorize it in any sense, and progressive as well, because if you look at the word progressive just in a literal sense, it makes sense that progressive metal can finally, in a way, be able to be more explorative, because progressive rock seemed to have very clear-cut parameters as what you can.
Yeah, but it didn't when it started. Like that's the point. It was progressive in the 70s, and then after that it became prog. It became a genre defined by the features the previous artists had done. But initially, it was bands trying to combine classical music and jazz with rock and doing and being as artistic as that was. But like you look at ELP, yes, Rush, but even Rush is like almost second generation because they were already following Yes and Genesis is the early one. But like there's differences in the early bands, but similarities because they came out at the same time. Like that's how it works. And like, oh, now we can finally experiment with progressive metal. You ain't experimenting with shit, Devin. You stopped experimenting in like the 90s. I don't want to hear it from Devin. You can experiment with your serrated picks. Is ridiculous. Oh my God, so backwards. Like, yes, that is my little complaint with prog, is that it is not experimenting with shit. It's just like, oh, let's do a riff in 7/4. There's been a lot of riffs in 7/4. Why is this one interesting? It's probably not. That's the diddly doos. Prog is diddly doos, and that's it. Diddly doos and unnecessary pretense. You gotta label stuff excessively. All your song titles in Latin, as many like chapter markers and then subdivisions of them and subsections and movements, with no musical organization, just making up titles for stuff, and then it doesn't matter. None of the rest of that shit matters, Devin, which is exactly also what Devin's pretty much been doing. Symphony about dicks.
So if you look at, in my opinion, metal is like a dynamic that you could adhere to any type of music. It's just a color rather than, well,
a color? You mean like a timbre? Like the sound of the guitar, like JP was saying? Man, he's turning all of this. Evan is making this conversation dumber. or less useful, less accurate. Credit to JP and Tosin, because Tosin I know has his moments of like, I'm reinventing the. You're not reinventing the guitar, bro. Like you followed a useful trend, and then copied some other people's guitars, and now you're just making weird stuff that looks funny but does the same thing.
Like sometimes you go to like a Broadway show or something, and it's supposed to be like a heavy section.
100%.
It's not. Yeah, they're playing the right notes.
Posers. This is true. Actually, this was the problem with, oh man, the nail on the head. The Bat Out of Hell musical, Jim Steinman songs. And like, Jim Steinman isn't a metal guy. It's rock. It may have like maybe little proto metal moments, but it's definitely rock with like a theatrical flair. The Bat Out of Hell musical was so like softened even in the rock parts. Like, we've heard all these songs done in a sort of intense, aggressive way as much as they could be, and then the music was like just like took all that away. And so like, he's got such a good point, and there's so many rock musicals now that it comes off. So again, the real problem though with the Jim Steinman musical is that the brass overpowered, I believe it. This was my theory, my thesis on my whole review of it, just going off the soundtrack, is that the brass overpowered the guitar because of the sort of competing frequency range and timbres, and the end result with all the orchestral stuff that is required by by Broadway union regulations. Although I'm in favor of the Broadway union regulations, and you don't necessarily have to like mix it. Like, it's not in those regulations that you have to hear all of the brass more than the guitar, and so they mixed it like a Broadway show, and they didn't realize the importance of the rock elements, and so it lost that edge. So yeah, man, this is like, I've seen some JP interviews where I was just like, fucking, but I appreciate him here. Maybe it's in contrast to Devin. Tosin right now are coming off real good to me, because I just, at least like, they sound sane. They sound so much saner than I expected. Devin has gone the other direction, and he's in the clouds. It's just a feeling, man. Heavy metal's like, he almost, like, he said it's a color, and he says it's about sensitivity. But I was expecting him to just, if he actually says it's a feeling, then somebody gotta break into the Toto song.
So I always think it's the intent. I think that's what defines heavy music in general. It's like, what is your intent on an emotional level?
It's the intent. You know what, man? There's so many bands right now who intend on heavy metal. Like, they're like, this is my other big pet peeve lately, is artists who are like metal adjacent. There's no metal happening, they're metal adjacent, or like there's one little moment like on one song, and so people are like, you're in the club, and because we're not gatekeeping anymore. And like, which is fine, but they're like, they wear leather jackets and they like metal. And then you're like, oh, so there's like some metal influence on the music. It's like, not really, but their intent, the intent is there.
Can music be progressive if it doesn't have time signature changes?
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Another thing about using odd time signatures.
The time signatures don't make it progressive at all anymore, because that's been thoroughly done. So there's a certain amount of stuff that hasn't been done in combination with other stuff. Like, time signatures had been out, like in, say, jazz or classical music, that has happened. But then in progressive rock and metal, it's like there is a certain amount of time. There were still new ways to do it or approach it. And literally, the Dream Theater is exactly as he described. It's that you took that thing that Rush was already doing and combined it with stuff like a metal band would do. And half of that is just the tone, but then some of it is techniques. And then voila, that's what, like, they just kept doing the thing. That's their whole thing. Even Meshuggah doesn't actually play in unusual time signatures or meters most of the time. It's mostly about polyrhythms. It's mostly can come back to a 4/4, but with a lot of really interesting syncopation going on in between the beats. And that almost brings it closer to like the kind of syncopation and polyrhythms in like the Purdy Shuffle, for instance. And so it comes back, it's all, again, Meshuggah, hard jazz. And so, but because that hadn't been done, because you'd gotten the rigid time signatures, like again, the classic, the diddly-doos, the Rush riff, like Dream Theater kept doing that shit for like a couple decades. And so then it's like, where do you go? And then it's like, and then the whole gent genre is taking that thing from Meshuggah of, it doesn't necessarily have to be, it could be in a weird meter, but it's more about finding those rhythms that aren't easily expressed by just playing something in a 7 or a 5. And so
It's another part of progressive metal is that it uses rhythmic dissonance.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me think of
It's interesting.
tension and release,
Yeah.
but rhythmic tension and release.
It's also more like, I've always looked at it that it's more, a little more natural, because everything that we do is in odd time, like the way we speak, the way we walk, the way we live life.
That's cool.
Like
never thought of it like
to
that.
walk
kind of moves to the beat of jazz.
Everything sounds.
It's turning into the Crashmore Santa Claus interview. It's kind of a cosmic gumbo. Scalular fragments.
Music is math. There is this sort of like structure.
That is true.
But not
Man.
all music communicates that.
I gotta say, Tosin and JP, they're really going up a notch in my book. It's weird because what is it about Beato? Because like it's not like he asks great questions. In fact, I would argue he asks very dumb questions, but he gets good interviews. Maybe because I don't know. Maybe people are just like, oh, let me. I'm gonna explain to this idiot. Listen, music is math, and that's true. And it's like, gotta explain this Beato guy because he's a YouTuber. YouTube will rot your brain.
So I learned some theory, but it was really like a crash course, like a 1-year thing. So I'm not as deep as one could be, but it helps.
But you know modes and things like that, Tosin. If you were to say Mixolydian flat 6 or something, you'll...
Yeah, because I learned the formulas to the stuff.
Yeah.
Which started to actually.
But you have those...
That's it, man. That's most of the theory. If you learn the formulas and the patterns, you don't need, like, that's why so much theory is redundant and not useful, because if you learn the underlying patterns of everything, it becomes a lot simpler and it's not such a big deal. And that's that's my favorite part of any Beato interview, is when they tell Beato he's wrong about, because he here we go again. Like, he's just trying, like, I mean, it's interesting, very interesting for Tosin also to downplay his knowledge, but also it makes perfect sense, because like the stuff that he does, it makes perfect sense. Like, he's really into the mathematical aspect of it. He does a lot of interesting rhythms, interesting note groupings, but like it doesn't take a million years to learn that. Like, I remember before I even did any music school, I read a thing by Steve Vai about unusual note groupings, and you understand the basic concept. It's you fit a certain number of notes within a certain beat, within like a certain for example, like a triplet within a quarter note, right? Is you take that amount of time, which is a quarter of a measure, one beat, assuming you're in a 4/time, and you play 3 notes in that amount of time. There you go. That's like if you're doing weirder groupings like a 5 or a 7, it's the same concept. 5 over what? 7 over what? You know? And it's it can get complicated, but the concept isn't that complicated. And then you just gotta practice doing stuff with it, and you understand it better, and it takes less effort to approach it. And so Tosin does the thing he does, the thing he's into, and he's so good at it because that's the thing he does. But that's also why he doesn't do other things that I'm more into, and that's fine. This is why I'm not as into Animals as Leaders. Beato's like, you don't know all the theory? You don't know, because like Beato spends all his time talking about super deep jazz theory, and what? And he's a YouTuber. He doesn't produce anything that like culminates from it, because he's just jerking it to theory. And Devin's never been that deep in it. Like he plays all his ridiculous open or like drop tunings and stuff, so he can play with one finger, and like he knows how to play, and he has he has his moments, but it's never been that complicated. That's one reason I didn't get into Devin that much at first too, because I was like, oh, this is a big time prog guy. Although when I first got into Devin Townsend, he was in his I think he was still doing strapping, but on and off. And his solo stuff was less known, much more niche. You know, now I don't know what the fuck he thinks he's doing, what experiments he thinks he's doing. Again, like that's why I know that like his whole like symphony, $1 million symphony thing is almost guaranteed to be terrible, because that's not the thing he understands. and neither would Tosin. Like, they're not studying symphonies. They're not studying symphony forms or like exist. Like, the point is something's been done a bunch and you don't understand it and you try to do that thing, you're likely to just repeat something that someone has done, and probably worse, because they were at least probably trying to do that. And all the classical composers were just studying symphonies and sonata form, and like there's a clear structure. It's like there's a whole symphonies up until a point had almost as a sort of predictable structure, although with a lot more room for variation within it, as like a song does, right? What we think of as a song is a verse, a chorus, maybe a bridge. You can get crazy with that, but most prog bands, it's really still ends up mapping onto that form. And that's fine. That's the actually point. That's better to understand what you're really doing and how far you're really taking it. Oh.
I have a term that I've been thinking about.
Uh-oh.
I call it like the tutorial generation that we're in right now, with young kids that are
What?
that can learn anything on through YouTube
Oh, yeah.
or whatever, Instagram, where people teach things and they
Except they can't. They
there's-
can't. And like people tell me all the time how they try to find things on YouTube and most of the videos are bad. I literally in my day job get that for like, I can't change a guitar string, and they're like, they'll literally be, I know they're supposed to be able to go on YouTube, but I do, and the videos are bad. And it turns out that goes across the board, and there's bits of stuff in there, and there are obviously going to be people who will be able to figure it out and learn stuff from that, but that's not, there's more resources. It doesn't change people's ability to necessarily filter through them, and arguably when there were less resources, some of them were still bad, because like there were, if you're a famous guitar player, you get a video, how well can you teach it? Like the Yngwie instructional videos are the classic example of this, because it had a booklet with all the examples, so you don't have to necessarily be able to like pick out the notes he's playing, which a lot of them didn't. But then he wouldn't explain shit. He would just be like, I like to play the linear line, and here is the harmonic minor. And he's like, okay, now here it is at half speed. And you'd be like, what the f***ing vein? He's like, all right, moving on. The quality of education is Beato. Beato doesn't understand. Like, I don't know if he...
been an explosion, especially in guitar.
Explosion.
More than I think any other instrument, probably guitar and bass, but because of the
computer-based samplers and electronic music is much bigger than the guitar. Beato, it's like Ableton, man. It's like, that is an instrument, and it is much more popular than the guitar. Look, I love the electric guitar. It is the best instrument, if you ask me, of all time. However, like, you could say synthesizers, but I don't think it's really necessarily synthesizers. And to some degree, you could say samplers, but it's really just the combination of those things and the ability to control the computer. The MacBook is the hottest new musical instrument, and Beato is like so out of touch. It's well, that's why we watch, because it's hilarious, and I hope they tell me he's wrong more.
internet now, kids can learn and expand upon techniques of people like
You used to have to
guys.
use
What do you
books.
think about that?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with emotional health. I think that technique is secondary to understand.
Yeah, right. When you were at your most mentally ill, Devin, that was your best work, which is terrible, because that's not supposed to be the thing. The thing is supposed to be, no, you should get help with your mental health. You make better art, except that Devin didn't. He did the opposite. And I don't. Yeah, he keeps doing this. They're just like, it's really, you learn theory, and then Devin's like, it's a color. It's yeah, he has that one thing on his mind. He has to no, and he always does too. And it's weird because he's obsessed with it, and yet I don't think it's helping, and that's what concerned to me. And then his weird like serrated picks is just another. He's like, what? Why is this? He's like, I just. For a year, I mailed my worn out picks to pick companies, and they wouldn't make me like, yeah, no, that's a weird thing to do, bro. Like, I think some of those companies were like, what does he want? I don't get it. You want us to like 3D print this? Like that's what they should have done. Somebody should have just 3D printed a copy of his picks, and he would have flipped out. It, like, literally, he wants a relict, a road worn relict pick, replica.
What sound makes you feel, and in order to be able to articulate that in a way that is resonant enough for other people to understand. You have to understand your own motivations. So I think that when we were
And that's
growing
why
up,
I'm making
so
a $1
much of
million
it was
symphony
how
about
did they play
dicks.
Eruption? How does Yngwie do alternate picking? What
Yeah,
have you?
ask Yngwie. It won't help.
When you say-
I used to work with this guy at a guitar store who was in a local band in Madison, and he would always, it's funny, he's talking about motivations. He'd be like, I kind of just want to hurt people with my music. Like, I want it to be heavy that they're like, ow, why are you doing this? And I was like, that's some motivation, pal. And this was perfectly with Devin's thing, is like, because he said metal's all about intent. And if your intent is to harm people with heavy metal, it perfectly blends with my philosophy of starting shows with a mild hostility towards your audience. As if you're a metal band, you'd be like, listen up, we're gonna rock your faces off. Like that's not a thing that you should, like, please don't rock my face off. I need my face. I need it tomorrow for people to recognize me. And it's like, we're gonna melt it off. And it's like, it's very aggressive.
Say practical purpose, you mean actually writing songs?
Yeah, or yes, but also
Oh
I've
no.
often thought of
Oh no.
the modes as just being equivalent to certain frames of mind. And if you are emotionally not mature enough to have experienced those things, you're going to have this toolkit with nothing to sort of apply it to.
If you're not divorced enough to appreciate the Locrian mode, then after a certain amount of therapy, one can begin to start to play the Lydian. Like, what? He just has to find the most insane, like, very disconnected. Don't even think about Lydian skills if you haven't backpacked Southeast Asia. Exactly. He's just like, you need the experience to really to know what a sharp fifth means to your heart, I guess. Devin just, it's like, I expected this interview to be kind of all over the place with a little bit of ridiculousness from each of them, but honestly, instead, JP has been my rock. He's been saying like classic truths as if I was watching the Rock Discipline video. Tosin's been very reasonable, talking about like his approaches, but he has not once said that he's trying to reinvent the guitar or anything like that. And Devin is out of his mind. It perfectly tracks with his picks and his sudden like loophole Kiesel endorsement.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild. Thinking back to when we were all younger trying to learn, the journey was way different. Like when I picture...
Yeah, there's like some truth, or you could find some truth to what he's saying, but not really. He takes it a step further to where you're like, that's not, no, I'm pretty sure it has to do with the intervals and the sound that they make. And he's like, yeah, but you can't really, it's like, he's like trying to like meet the worst jazz guys in the end zone of pretentiousness, like, which makes it, he was saying like earlier how he feels like, which is a totally backwards view, he feels that like prog metal can finally now begin to experiment. Like, no, that's the opposite of the way music history has worked. But it makes sense because like in a jazz guys, you can't feel Lydian until you've experienced a certain level. Again, he's not, I don't believe he's divorced, but he just feels he's divorced in his soul. He should just pivot to divorcecore. Like maybe he'd actually write some good stuff again if it was, maybe he should get divorced. I'm not wishing any ill legal trouble on him. Yeah, right.
Like,
JP's
just
not the most
hearing-
cringe person in the room, and that's what this whole interview I've been like he's making JP and Tosin sound so much. I mean, they're also doing a good job. I think maybe it's Beato. Maybe something about Beato brings this out because like the Luke interview was really good, but mostly because Beato didn't talk. Like when you can get someone to just go, he just says some dumb crap, and they're like, listen, let me just tell you about this story about this one time. And you're like, that's much better. Forget about the thing Beato said.
There's so many examples I can give. Let's say I just heard like a Boston song on the radio.
very likely
mind,
occurrence.
like being able to play like that technique wise, but not having any understanding about harmonizing guitar and this. Why, when I play it, does it not sound like
Because you didn't
Boston?
build your
No,
own
because there's
your own
three
preamp,
guitar
JP.
harmonies on it.
Yeah. Also, the dude like made his own gear. He made his own preamp, and so he got an actual tone that nobody else had at the time. Again, as we were talking about earlier, and how Beato was like, even a metal band like Black Sabbath, for some reason, in the 70s, the tone didn't really sound like what we think of as metal tone. It's like, right, because the technology did not exist. Heavy metal high gain technology had progressed through the 80s and 90s. And similarly, the dude from Boston invented his own gear and recorded all his shit. And so not only does he know how to do a harmony, which other people were doing, Jay Graydon very famously put a lot of sweet guitar harmonies on stuff in the 80s. And but yeah, he made his own preamps and shit. And so he got that tone and then layered it. And so yeah, it's like multiple layers to what you got to work out to get that. Or you just got to feel it. It's I'm just waiting for Debbie to say it's a feeling. Because we were talking about different stages of what's available. Like, you know, his generation, you had to like slow down a record. I had tabs, which at the time people were like, "This is amazing. You can learn anything with tabs." Same as Beato's bullshit attitude about YouTube. But most of the tabs were wrong. So similarly, like, slow your roll is not that exciting. It's exciting, but it's not as great as you think it is. But I had this exact same experience where I tried to learn like Led Zeppelin solos, and there was all the bends, like the same kind of some of the stuff that like Luke does, where you like bend to a note and then play the like note above, like stuff like that. Like I took a long time to learn that kind of stuff, and so I couldn't learn those solos. It was actually much easier eventually to learn like a Dream Theater solo, where it was just like, oh, you just play all these notes and you just pick them real fast, and there was none of this like no lyrical phrasing, you know, as much. I mean, there's certain stuff, but and by that point I knew that shit anyway. But the point was, early on, the Jimmy Page solos was just like, it just looked like a pentatonic scale like threw up on the page. That kind of stuff I couldn't learn from transcription for the longest time.
And I was,
but it turns out it didn't matter, because if you just played a bunch of vaguely similar pentatonic stuff, no one could tell.
But now, as you said, it's all just like that. If you want to learn something, here is exactly how you do it.
You watch the person that play it.
You could either watch the actual person that played it.
Yeah, that helps.
It
helps, and it helps you get the more accurate information. Because again, even a lot of tabs were wrong. A lot of professional licensed transcriptions were wrong, because they would hire somebody to transcribe it. I know, because I almost tried to do this for money, and then I found out A, I was very slow at transcribing, B, the money was bad, and C, I didn't like it. But I know people who, you know, out of music school, that's a good gig they would get is doing transcriptions, like Hal Leonard or somebody, and they just they tell you what song to do, and you transcribe it, you send it back, and they get the like approval from the artist. But the like, I know that like Petrucci actually like signed off on a lot of Dream Theater transcriptions at some point. Like that was the whole thing. And I think Michael Romeo might have done that with Symphony X too, but that didn't used to happen. Like they never used to even consult them, other than like, can we print this and therefore pay you? And they were going to be like, yes. Like they weren't going to be like, is it accurate? Like, especially in a band like Pearl Jam or something. I'm like, here's where to send the checks. Art of Guitar, maybe, who goes over how wrong the tab. But yeah, exactly. And that was the thing. Like I was in a Rush tabs mailing list in the 90s, and they would do their own transcriptions, and they were more accurate than most of the you know, free range ones. But on top of that, you'd have multiple guys transcribing the same song and then arguing over parts of them. And so it just made me realize, oh, it's just a lot of it's just wrong. And so there's always going to be some element of figuring shit out. Like, and even if you see someone play something, it doesn't always give you all the information. Because a lot of the time people just go, they're just like, oh, it looks like really easy when he does it. Like, yeah, okay. And is he going to explain what he's doing? Like, you know, the Yngwie video the Yngwie video is a lot of fun to watch, but it didn't teach you a whole lot.
other people, break it
There's a
down.
lot of
and do it.
instructional
And not
YouTube
only
videos that are
but
just
here are the
also
effects
bad,
that we
bad
use.
lessons, bad.
You know,
Oh,
this is
and people trying to overteach. That's the big one. People selling lesson programs about their new system. I'm not going to name them, but I could. But there's like most of them, not even counting the Beato book, which doesn't even try that hard. The Beato book's just like, here is the same collection of scales and modes and chords and everything, and just all printed out. But like they'll try to like make up a new system for learning scales, and it's like you don't have to do that. Like I understand trying to like point out underlying patterns to people, but like you're just making it like, here are the scale fragments and you put them together. Like, yeah, okay, you're making it more complicated. Like, don't make the music theory more complicated, which is what Beato loves to do.
We've had the good fortune to work with a bunch of orchestras recently, and I've had
Oh,
to
no, he's
actually
doing the
take
symphony about
music theory
dicks.
over the past couple of years just so I can have a dialogue in a way that I'm able to save time. Because at first, we did this project
Devin Townsend's
going to
be canceled for talking about dicks to his orchestra.
Intro passage is supposed to be
Not appropriate.
a butterfly that lands progressively slower from leaf to leaf. And so it's got this blink, ting. So there's got to be like the piccolo's up there, and you got to have.
It sounds like I had lunch with some girl from my theory class, and she told me about her like A+ music theory paper, which was basically the piece transforms from a caterpillar to a butterfly. And I was like, oh, I didn't know we were supposed to be that full of shit. Oh, okay, well, shit, I'll try that next time. I was trying to like explain functional music theory, but oh no, it's like a butterfly. Oh, great. So, there you go.
The bell's down there every time his feet land on the leaf. And the guy's like, really? He's like, well, what key is it? And I'm like,
Brian Wilson hallucinated a lot too, but his music's more popular. So.
10 seconds. I'm like, A, B, C, D, E. I think it's in F. And then he plays. I'm like, no, it's F sharp. Oh, actually. So at that point, I started recognizing that I needed someone to help me interpret that language.
You need Angelo Badalamenti because David Lynch has a very short book, which he reads himself. He has this very short chapter where he talks about how he works with Angelo Badalamenti, and he's like, I sit down at the piano with him and I tell him what I want and I use my words, and then he plays. He tries to play my words, and sometimes he plays very badly, and I say, no, 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 Angelo, and then I change my words, and then he plays, and sometimes better, but it's still a little bad. I say, no, 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 Angelo, and then I say, I change my words some more, and then eventually he plays something, and I'm like, that's it, Angelo, and then he writes the rest of the music based off that one idea or whatever. And so I was like, this is both the greatest and worst way. Like, I would love to have a job like that where some guy, I'm just like, you just play something until he's like, that's it. And then you're like, all right, go away. But like, also, if it was anyone but David Lynch, you would just murder them. Like, you would be like, what did you say to me? Like, no, 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 Angel. And also he's like, sometimes he plays very bad. I don't think he's playing badly. It's just he's not playing the thing you want that you have no musical language to describe. Much like Devin here. Devin needs his Angelo, which ironically, though, he's supposed to be the Angelo Badalamenti. He's supposed to be the musician interpreting his words, but he can't because he's the wrong kind of musician for the thing he's trying to do, which has also been done over several hundred years and has been like fully explored. But he doesn't understand that because he don't got no music education, and it's going to be real bad.
I have this shape. It makes me feel like either a certain color or a certain shape or a certain sensation that then you can kind of manipulate and massage into a passage that puts across.
All right, now don't massage any of the people in the orchestra, Devin. Okay, they're already we talking. Okay, maybe it's not about dicks anymore. Maybe it's about butterflies because that's a lot less likely to get them in trouble. But don't massage them. Okay,
different frame of mind. So it's like the process now is much more about, well, how do you learn about your own frame of mind? How do you learn about your own?
Or you could have just learned about music. You could have wrote it down, but you don't like that. All of the language exists. You just refuse to learn it because you think that you need to like, again, cross the rainbow bridge and like receive it from the elves in your mind elves or whatever. And like, again, usually people use drugs for that kind of thing, and he's trying to be like less on drugs, and so.
Actually, that's why Keneally was amazing because he was able to. Mike Keneally plays guitar in the band, and
Keneally is his Badalamenti, which makes perfect sense.
He's Mike Keneally. He's like
Great.
doing me
Yeah.
a favor because he's a genius and should be in.
But he
outer
knows how
space.
music works.
I find really practical in the sense that the function of music becomes really vibratory. It's all about how these vibrations interact
Oh, he's literally
with each other.
talking about
Consonance and the
vibrations.
dissonance
Come on,
is
man.
much
Yeah,
more-
the string vibrates. It's literally the air vibrates, and that's how you get sounds that turns into music. Like,